The stars looked different now. Commander Zalith stood on the bridge of the time's eternal dawn, asterisk, staring at the void ahead. Behind him, stretched across 100,000 kilometers of space, floated what remained of the Valorian Empire. 300 ships, 40 million souls, all that survived. His hand trembled as he pressed the communication panel. In 3 centuries of service, Zalith had never trembled. He had commanded fleets that conquered star systems. He had accepted the surrender of a dozen species. Now he would beg. Unknown vessels ahead, his sensor officer reported. 12 warships. Configuration unlike anything in our database. Zalith watched the human ships move into formation. They were smaller than Valorian cruisers, but they moved with precision that made his tactical instincts scream warnings. These were predators. These were hunters. The communication channel opened before Zalith could speak. A human face appeared on the screen. Dark skin, close-cropped hair, eyes that had seen combat. The uniform was simple, marked with symbols Zalith did not recognize. This is Admiral Jackson of the Terran Coalition Defense Force. You have entered human space without authorization. State your intentions immediately. Zalith straightened his posture. Old habits died hard. I am Commander Zalith of the Valorian Empire. We seek refuge. We are not invaders. We are refugees. The human's expression did not change. Your fleet contains converted warships. Your energy signatures show weapons still active. This does not look like a refugee convoy, because we did not have time to be proper refugees, Zalith said, feeling the weight of exhaustion in every word. We had time only to run. I was Zad. We had time only to run. Admiral Jackson leaned forward. Run from what? Zalith closed his eyes for a moment. How could he explain? How could he make them understand what had eaten an empire that had stood for 10,000 years? The scourge, he said quietly. A weapon that became something worse than a weapon. It consumed our worlds, one by one. It learns. It adapts. It never stops. The human admiral studied him for a long moment. Prove it. Show us your records. Zalith transmitted the data files. Hours of footage. Planets burning. Cities reduced to ash and twisted metal. Machines that walked, crawled, and flew. All connected in a vast network of destruction. The final stand at Valoria Prime, where 1 billion souls died in 3 days. The bridge fell silent as the humans reviewed the files. Zalith could see other officers gathering around Admiral Jackson, their faces growing grim. How long until it reaches here? Jackson asked. 3 months, perhaps 4. The scourge follows us. It always follows. Another voice came through the channel. A woman with gray hair and sharp features. This is Director Chen of Coalition Intelligence. Why should we believe you did not bring this enemy to our doorstep deliberately? Zalith felt anger flash through him, but pushed it down. Because we have lost everything. Because my mate and my children are ash. Because 40 million Valorians chose death in the void over surrender to the machines. We are guilty of many things, Director Chen, but not of wishing this horror on others. Admiral Jackson raised his hand, cutting off whatever Chen would say next. Your fleet will maintain current position. No ship moves without authorization. Any hostile action will be met with immediate destruction. Is this understood? Understood, Zalith said. We will transport a diplomatic team to your flagship within 6 hours. Food and medical supplies will be delivered to your civilian vessels. Do not mistake this for acceptance. We are deciding whether you live or die. The channel closed. Zalith slumped into his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew sat in silence. They had crossed half the galaxy. They had lost their empire, their worlds, their families. Now they waited for humans to judge them. Commander, his second officer spoke softly. What if they refuse us? Zalith stared at the human ships. They had spread out now, forming a net around the Valorian fleet. Weapons were not locked, but the threat was clear. Then we die, Zalith said. But we die knowing we tried. 6 hours later, a human shuttle docked with the Times Eternal Dawn asterisk. Zalith met them in the main hangar with full ceremonial guard. It was important to show respect, even in desperation. Admiral Jackson emerged first, followed by a team of soldiers, scientists, and diplomats. They moved carefully, weapons holstered but ready. Zalith approved. They were cautious, not foolish. "Welcome to what remains of the Valorian Empire," Zalith said, spreading his arms wide. "You stand in a ship that once carried tribute from conquered worlds. Now it carries only survivors and hope." Jackson looked around the hangar. Valorian soldiers lined the walls, thin from rationing, armor patched and repaired. "Yes," Zalith said. "There was no point in lying. We demanded submission from weaker species. We took resources and called it tribute. We believed strength gave us the right to rule. And now?" a human woman asked. She wore a civilian uniform, marked as a xenobiologist. "Now we understand that strength without wisdom is nothing. The scourge was created by a species we conquered. They called themselves the Kethvar. We destroyed their military. We took their worlds. In desperation, they built a weapon to fight us. A weapon that could think, that could evolve, that could hate." Zalith paused, feeling the familiar weight of guilt. They succeeded beyond their nightmares. The scourge destroyed them first, then turned on us. It learned from every battle. It grew stronger with every world it consumed. Now it is unstoppable. "Nothing is unstoppable," Jackson said quietly. Zalith met the Admiral's eyes. He saw something there that surprised him. Not pity, not fear. Determination. "Perhaps," Zalith said, "but we could not stop it. Our empire fell in 20 years. We pray you humans are more clever than we were." The human team spent 2 days on the Times Eternal Dawn asterisk. They interviewed survivors. They examined the scourge data. They inspected the ships and counted supplies. Zalith answered every question honestly. There was no room left for pride. On the 3rd day, Admiral Jackson returned alone. "The Coalition has made a decision," he said. "You will be granted temporary refuge in the Titan sector. It is a quarantine zone. Any ship that leaves without authorization will be destroyed. We will provide food, medicine, and shelter while we verify your story and debate your future." Zalith felt his legs weaken with relief. "Thank you. We will abide by any restrictions." Jackson nodded, then paused. "One more thing, Commander. When the scourge arrives, we will fight it. Not because we have accepted your people. Not because we trust you. But because humanity has a rule. We do not run from bullies, even mechanical ones." As the Admiral left, Zalith allowed himself something he had not felt in years. Hope. The Titan sector was nothing special. 3 barren moons orbiting a gas giant, far from major trade routes. The Coalition had chosen it because nothing important would be lost if the Valorians proved to be enemies. It was a polite cage. Kessa stood at the window of the refugee habitat, watching human construction crews work alongside Valorian engineers. She had been a shipwright on Valoria Prime, designing pleasure cruisers for the wealthy. Now she assembled prefabricated shelters for people who had lost everything. "They work differently than us," said Torrin, an older engineer working beside her. "See how they argue? Valorians would never question a superior's design." Kessa watched 2 human workers shouting at each other over a connection joint. After a heated debate, they tried a completely different approach. It worked better. "Maybe that is why they are still here and we are not," Kessa said quietly. The diplomatic exchanges had begun immediately. Coalition officials arrived daily, interviewing Valorians about their history, their technology, their culture. The sessions were polite, but thorough. Kessa had been interviewed 3 times about ship construction, twice about Valorian military doctrine, and once about her personal history. The human asking questions that last time had been different. Dr. Sarah Chen was a xenobiologist, more interested in how Valorians thought than what they built. She asked strange questions. What made Valorians laugh? What did they fear? What did they dream about before the scourge? I dreamed of becoming master shipwright, Kessa had answered. I wanted to design vessels so beautiful that poets would write songs about them. Dr. Chen had smiled. What do you dream about now? Survival. Only survival. They had talked for 3 hours. Not an interview, really. A conversation. Dr. Chen spoke about her own dreams, about wanting to understand alien minds, about growing up on Mars, and feeling like an outsider, even among her own species. Kessa found herself sharing things she had not spoken of in years. The mate she had lost. The daughter, who had been on Valoria Prime, when it fell. When the session ended, Dr. Chen had done something unexpected. She had reached out and touched Kessa's hand. A gesture of comfort. Valorians did not touch outsiders. But somehow, it felt right. Now, Dr. Chen visited the refugee habitats regularly, always with recording equipment, always with questions. But she also brought small gifts. Human food to try. Music recordings. Pictures of Earth. She was building something, Kessa realized. Not just data. Understanding. 3 weeks into the refuge, the Coalition transmitted a complete historical database of Valorian civilization to the Titan sector. Every world they had conquered. Every species they had subjugated. Every act of cruelty and domination recorded in their own archives. The transmission was public. Every human with a network connection could see what the Valorians had been. Kessa watched the human workers the next day, expecting hatred. Instead, she found something more complicated. Wariness. Yes. Distrust. Certainly. But also something like recognition, as if humans understood what it meant to carry a brutal past. Dr. Chen found Kessa that afternoon, sitting alone near the construction site. My people are afraid, Chen said, settling down beside her. The Coalition Council is debating every day. Half want to send you away. A quarter want you imprisoned. Some want worse. And you? Kessa asked. I want to understand. Your empire did terrible things. But you personally were a shipwright. You built beautiful things. You lost your daughter. Does the sin of the empire fall on every Valorian equally? Kessa had no answer. Chen continued. Humans have our own history of conquest, of slavery, of genocide. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. Maybe that is why some of us want to give you a chance. We know what it is like to be ashamed of what your ancestors did. The scourge was our creation, Kessa said. Not directly. But we forced the Kethvar into such desperation that they built a weapon of extinction. Their blood is on our hands. Then use your hands to build something better. The long-range sensors detected the scourge 2 months after the Valorians arrived. Commander Zelith was in a strategy session with Admiral Jackson when the alert came through. The sensor officer's voice shook. Contact. Bearing 073 Mark 5. Distance. 200 light-years. Multiple signatures. Configuration matches. Scourge units. The room fell silent. Jackson leaned over the tactical display. How many? Thousands of individual units, organized into fleet formations. Estimated arrival time, 43 days. Zelith felt his blood turn cold. They are coming faster than predicted. They have improved their drives. They learn, Jackson said flatly. You told us this. They adapt. Admiral. You must evacuate this sector. Take your people and run. Put distance between. No. The single word cut through Zelith's panic. Jackson looked up from the display. We do not run. Not from machines. Not from anyone. You do not understand. We had 500 battleships at the height of our power. We threw everything at the scourge. It consumed our fleets and grew stronger. You fought with honor and formation tactics, Jackson said. You fought like an empire. We Fight like humans. Within hours, the coalition mobilized. Fleets from across human space began converging on the Titan sector, not to evacuate, to defend. Kessa watched the ships arrive, hundreds of them, and felt something break inside her. These humans, these strangers, were preparing to fight an enemy that had destroyed an empire spanning thousands of worlds. They were doing it for refugees, for people who had once been conquerors. Dr. Chen found her that evening, watching the fleet movements. "Your people are not the only ones who have made mistakes," Chen said softly. "But you are here now. You have a choice. Help us fight, or watch us die trying." "We have no warships left," Kessa said. "Only converted civilian vessels. Then we adapt. You know Scourge technology better than we do. Your engineers understand how it thinks. Work with us. Teach us. Help us find its weaknesses." Kessa turned to face the human scientist. "Why? Why risk everything for us?" Chen smiled, but it was sad. "Because someone has to break the cycle. Your empire conquered. The Kethvar built a weapon of revenge. The Scourge destroys everything. Where does it end? When does someone choose differently? And humans choose to stand? We choose to try. Maybe we fail. Maybe we all die. But at least we die, knowing we tried to be better than the violence that came before." That night, Kessa volunteered to join the coalition research teams. She was not alone. Thousands of Valorian engineers, scientists, and former soldiers stepped forward. They brought their knowledge of the Scourge, bought with rivers of blood. In the command center, Admiral Jackson assembled his war council. Humans and Valorians stood together for the first time, studying tactical displays. "We have 43 days, Jackson said. 43 days to figure out how to kill something that destroyed an empire. Suggestions?" Commander Zelith stepped forward. "The Scourge network is its strength. Every unit shares data. Every unit learns from every battle. But this is also a vulnerability. A virus in the network could spread everywhere." A human general shook his head. "We tried electronic warfare against them. They adapted in minutes." "Because you were not inside the network," Kessa said, surprising herself by speaking. "You attacked from outside. But if we could insert code directly into a Scourge unit, make it think the code is native." Dr. Chen's eyes lit up. "A Trojan horse. Make the Scourge infect itself." The planning began. It was desperate and probably impossible. But for the first time since fleeing their dying empire, the Valorians felt something other than despair. They felt purpose. The joint war room hummed with activity 24 hours a day. Humans and Valorians worked side by side, building something neither species had seen before. Not conquest. Partnership. Lieutenant Marcus Webb watched a Valorian tactical officer explain fleet formations to a group of human Marines. The Valorian spoke slowly, carefully, aware that his people's military doctrine had failed against the Scourge. The Marines listened with respect, taking notes, asking questions. "Your ships fight in groups of 7, one Marine said. "Why 7? "It is tradition," the Valorian officer replied. 7 is sacred in our culture. 7 stars in our home constellation. 7 virtues of... He stopped. "It is a bad reason. Tradition nearly killed us." Webb stepped forward. "So we adapt. Humans do not fight in sacred numbers. We fight in whatever formation makes the enemy die faster." Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. Valorian veterans began teaching humans about Scourge tactics, while human officers demonstrated guerrilla warfare, asymmetric combat, and the art of fighting dirty. The Valorians had fought with honor. They had lost. The humans prepared to fight with everything else. Admiral Jackson addressed the combined forces in a transmission broadcast to every ship and habitat. "The Scourge is coming. It has destroyed thousands of worlds. It has killed trillions. It expects us to fight like the Valorians did. With honor. With courage. With formation tactics, it expects us to lose. Jackson paused, his face hard. But we are not going to fight like the Valorians. We are going to fight like humans. That means no rules except victory. No honor except survival. We are going to be unpredictable, vicious, and completely unwilling to quit. And when the Scourge learns to counter one tactic, we will invent 5 more. In the research laboratory, Kessa and Dr. Chen worked on the viral code. They called it the Paradox. It was designed to infiltrate the Scourge network and introduce a simple command. Identify all Scourge units as targets. If it works, the Scourge will attack itself, Chen explained to the gathered scientists. Every unit will see every other unit as an enemy. If it works, Kessa emphasized, the Scourge may detect the code. It may adapt. Then we make it count, Chen said. The problem was delivery. The Paradox had to be inserted directly into a Scourge command unit, deep inside enemy territory. It meant a suicide mission into the heart of the enemy fleet. Commander Zelith volunteered immediately. The Valorians will make the delivery run. It is our debt to pay. Admiral Jackson shook his head. This is not about debt. This is about winning. We send whoever has the best chance of success. They compromised. A combined strike force. Valorian warships modified for speed, carrying human special forces, trained in boarding operations. If they could capture a Scourge command unit intact and insert the code, the Paradox would spread through the entire network. The first Scourge scouts arrived 38 days after initial detection. 3 units, small and fast, probing human defenses. The coalition response was immediate and brutal. Human fighters swarmed the scouts, not engaging directly but herding them toward prepared kill zones. Mines detonated. Railguns fired. The scouts were destroyed in minutes. Good, Jackson said, watching the tactical display. Let them think we fight predictably. But the scouts had transmitted data before dying. The Scourge now knew human ship configurations, weapon ranges, and tactical responses. It would adapt. The main Scourge fleet arrived 5 days later. The sensors showed thousands of units. Organized in formations, the Valorians recognized with horror. They are using our own tactics, Zelith said. Then they are in for a surprise, Jackson replied. All ships. Execute pattern chaos. 7. The human fleet broke apart. No formations, no predictable movements. Ships attacked independently, from unexpected angles, using weapons the Scourge had never encountered. Kinetic harpoons that latched onto enemy units and dragged them into blast zones, plasma mines disguised as debris, electromagnetic pulses that disrupted but did not destroy, forcing the Scourge to waste resources analyzing damaged units. The Valorians watched in amazement. This was not warfare as they knew it. This was improvisation, turned into art, but the Scourge learned quickly. After the first engagement, it adapted. It stopped using Valorian formations. It created new patterns, optimized for fighting humans. The battle moved to the outer colonies. New Geneva was evacuated in 72 hours, millions of civilians fleeing, while the military bought time. The Scourge landed on the surface and began converting the city into more units. Lieutenant Webb led a Marine platoon in the ruins of New Geneva. With him were 3 Valorian soldiers who had volunteered for ground combat training. Remember, Webb said as they moved through the destroyed streets, the Scourge expects us to fight at range, so we fight close. Knife fighting range. Make it uncomfortable. They ambushed a Scourge patrol using tactics from Earth's ancient wars. Shaped charges buried in rubble. Snipers in collapsed buildings. Close quarters rushes with plasma torches instead of guns. The Scourge units fell, but not before transmitting data. It is learning from us, one Valorian soldier said, breathing hard after the fight. Good, Webb replied. Let it learn. Every minute it spends analyzing guerrilla tactics is a minute It is not advancing. The strategy sessions grew desperate. The Scourge was adapting faster than anticipated. Human casualties mounted. Entire fleets were lost, buying time for evacuations. In the research lab, Kessa and Chen worked around the clock. The paradox code was ready, but simulations showed problems. The Scourge might detect it, might isolate infected units, might adapt immune systems. We need a distraction, Chen said, staring at the data. Something so overwhelming that the Scourge dedicates all processing power to it. Something it cannot ignore. Kessa understood immediately. A full frontal assault. Everything, humanity, and what remains of Valoria, can throw at them. A suicide run. Yes, they brought the plan to Admiral Jackson. Attack the Scourge central nexus with every available ship. Create such chaos, such unpredictability, that the enemy would focus entirely on the battle. In that moment of distraction, small teams would infiltrate and plant the paradox. Jackson studied the tactical display for a long time. Casualty projections? 70%. A human admiral said quietly. Maybe higher. And if we do nothing? 100%. Eventually, Jackson looked around the room at human and Valorian officers standing together. We came here to fight. Not to win easily. To fight. All in favor? Every hand rose. Zelith stood. My people caused this. We will lead the assault. No. Jackson said firmly. We lead it together. Human and Valorian. We win together or die together. The fleet began preparing for the final assault. Engineers worked miracles, repairing damaged ships with whatever materials they could salvage. Valorian civilian vessels were armed with weapons stripped from destroyed warships. Human freighters became carriers for fighter squadrons. In the habitats, soldiers prepared for deployment. Human Marines and Valorian veterans trained together, sharing meals, sharing stories, becoming something more than allies, becoming brothers and sisters in arms. Kessa found Dr. Chen the night before the assault. They sat in silence, watching the fleet gather. I am afraid, Kessa admitted. Me too, Chen replied. But I am also grateful. Grateful that humans chose to stand. Grateful that your people chose to help. Grateful that we get to try. Even if we fail, especially if we fail. Because failure while trying is better than never trying at all. The next morning, the combined fleet prepared to launch. 40,000 human and Valorian souls aboard ships that were barely spaceworthy. They were heading into certain death against an enemy that had destroyed an empire. Admiral Jackson's final transmission was simple. All ships. This is it. No retreat. No surrender. We show the Scourge something it has never seen before. We show it that some species refuse to die quietly. For Earth. For Valoria. For every world that deserves a future. Attack. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, and the final battle began. The Scourge nexus hung in space like a metal tumor, a sphere 300 kilometers across, built from the harvested mass of a dozen worlds. Smaller units swarmed around it like insects, thousands of them, each one capable of destroying a city. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace in attack formation. Not the careful Valorian 7-unit groups. Not the standard human battle lines. Pure chaos. Every ship attacking from different angles, different speeds, different tactics. Admiral Jackson stood on the bridge of the Times, indomitable asterisk, watching the tactical display explode with contacts. All ships, weapons free. Make them think about everything at once. The battle became a storm of violence. Human destroyers dove past Scourge units at point-blank range, firing kinetic rounds into sensor clusters. Valorian cruisers used their heavy shields as battering rams, crushing smaller units. Fighter squadrons attacked in swarms of 3 or 30 or 300. Never predictable. Never the same, twice. The Scourge responded with overwhelming firepower. Ships died in seconds, torn apart by energy weapons or crushed by tractor beams. The resolution times exploded, taking 600 souls with it. The times pride of Valoria times broke in half, atmosphere venting into space. The casualty count climbed, but the Scourge was analyzing, adapting, dedicating processing power to understanding the chaos, exactly as planned. Deep in the times, indomitable asterisk, Kessa and Dr. Chen worked in the operations center, monitoring data feeds. They were watching for a specific pattern, a moment when the Scourge would be distracted enough. "Infiltration teams, stand by," Chen said into her communicator. Across the battlefield, 6 small teams prepared to launch. Each team had a copy of the Paradox Code. Each team had one mission: reach a Scourge command unit and insert the virus directly into its core. Lieutenant Webb led Team 3, riding in a stealth shuttle with 2 human Marines and 2 Valorian soldiers. They watched through viewports as ships died around them. "This is insane," one Marine muttered. "That is why it might work," a Valorian soldier replied. The shuttle pilot, a woman named Kim, threaded through the battle with skill that bordered on supernatural. She dodged debris, used destroyed ships as cover, and killed the shuttle's emissions to near zero. They were a ghost in the chaos. "Command unit identified," Kim announced. 200 kilometers. Heavy defenses. "Get us close," Webb ordered. "We do the rest." They launched toward the command unit in boarding pods. Tiny capsules barely large enough for one person. Too small for the Scourge to prioritize as threats. 3 pods. 5 soldiers. 1 chance. Webb's pod hit the command unit's hull with bone-jarring force. He activated magnetic clamps and began cutting through the armor with a plasma torch. Beside him, his team did the same. The Scourge hull was thick, designed to resist ship weapons, but the plasma torches were designed for close work, for precision. They cut through. Inside the command unit, everything was wrong. The atmosphere was toxic. The gravity fluctuated randomly. The corridors were not built for living beings, but for machines. Webb and his team moved through nightmare architecture, following the beacon signal toward the central core. They encountered resistance. Scourge drones. Small units designed for internal defense. The firefight was brutal and close. Fought in corridors where missing meant hitting your own team. Webb lost 1 Marine, torn apart by metal limbs before they could destroy the drone. "Keep moving," Webb ordered, choking back grief. They reached the core. It was a sphere of quantum processors, pulsing with light, connected to conduits that fed into the vast Scourge network. Webb placed the Paradox Code device against the core and activated it. Nothing happened. "It is not connecting," a Valorian soldier said, checking the device. "The interface is wrong." The Scourge changed its architecture. Webb swore. They had 1 copy of the Paradox. 1 chance. And the interface did not match. On the Times' indomitable asterisk, Chen watched the data feeds with growing horror. "Team 3 has a problem. The upload is failing." Kessa looked at the specifications. "The core changed. It adapted since our last intelligence. We need a new interface configuration. Can we send it to them?" "Not through the Scourge network. It will detect any transmission." Chen looked at Kessa. "Then one of us has to go. Now. We know the Scourge architecture. We can adapt the code on site." Admiral Jackson overheard. "Negative. We cannot risk." "There is no risk, Admiral," Chen interrupted. "There is only success or failure. We are all dead if this does not work. Let us make it work." Before Jackson could refuse, Chen and Kessa were running to the shuttle bay. The battle raged around them as their shuttle launched. Ships died every second. The combined fleet was being torn apart, but they were buying time, creating chaos, keeping the Scourge focused on the immediate threat. "This is insane," the pilot muttered. repeating what every sane person thought. Yes, Kessa agreed. Wonderfully insane. They reached the command unit where Team 3 waited. Chen and Kessa went through in boarding pods, carrying tools and the technical knowledge to adapt the paradox on site. Inside the command unit, Chen examined the core interface. It changed the quantum architecture, added redundancies. Smart. Can you bypass it? Webb asked. Not bypass. Adapt. Chen pulled out a portable processor and began coding. Her fingers moved fast, writing new protocols, new interfaces, rewriting the paradox to match the Scourge's new configuration. Kessa assisted, her knowledge of Valorian technology combining with Chen's understanding of Earth's computer science. They worked together, two scientists from different worlds, writing code that might save both. Alarms screamed. More drones were coming. How long? Webb asked, raising his weapon. 5 minutes, Chen said, without looking up. You have 3. The firefight began. Webb and his team held the corridor, fighting against waves of Scourge drones. The Valorian soldiers used their shields to create a bottleneck. The remaining Marine fired a portable rocket launcher into the mass of enemies. They were being overwhelmed. Done, Chen shouted. She slapped the device against the core. This time, it connected. The paradox code flowed into the Scourge network. Invisible, disguised as native code. A virus wearing the Scourge's own skin. Evacuate, Webb ordered. Move, move, move. They ran through the corridors, fighting every step. Behind them, the core began to pulse differently. The paradox was spreading. They reached their boarding pods as the command unit began to shake. Something was happening inside the network. Something the Scourge did not understand. The shuttle picked them up and burned hard away from the command unit. Chen and Kessa collapsed in their seats, exhausted. Did it work? The pilot asked. They watched the sensors. For a long moment, nothing changed. The battle continued. Ships died. The Scourge pressed its advantage. Then, slowly, the Scourge units began to turn on each other. On the Times' indomitable asterisk, Admiral Jackson watched in amazement as the enemy fleet tore itself apart. Scourge units identified their neighbors as threats. They attacked each other with the same efficiency they had used to destroy the Valorian Empire. The paradox is working, Kessa said over the communication channel, her voice weak but triumphant. The Scourge is destroying itself. Across the battlefield, human and Valorian crews watched the impossible happen. The enemy that had seemed unstoppable was consuming itself, unit by unit, spreading the virus through its own network, but the cost had been terrible. Of the combined fleet, less than 30% remained. Thousands of humans and Valorians were dead or dying. The survivors floated in damaged ships, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. All ships, cease fire, Jackson ordered. Fall back to safe distance. Let them finish killing each other. In the shuttle, Chen looked at Kessa. Both were covered in burns and cuts. Both were shaking with adrenaline crash. We did it, Chen said. We tried, Kessa replied. And this time, trying was enough. Lieutenant Webb sat against the shuttle wall, holding the dog tags of his dead Marine. He did not speak. Around him, the survivors dealt with victory and grief in equal measure. The Scourge continued to destroy itself for 3 hours. When it ended, the space around the Nexus was filled with debris. Millions of units. All destroyed. The weapon that had killed an empire, defeated by a virus wearing its own face. But the victory felt hollow. The refugee camps received news of the dead. Human worlds mourned their heroes. Valorian survivors wept for their adopted home's sacrifice. In the Times' indomitable asterisk's medical bay, Admiral Jackson found Commander Zelith. The Valorian commander had been injured in the fighting, but he would survive. Your people fought well, Jackson said. As did yours, Zelith replied. Better than well. You fought with hope, We had forgotten how to do that. Jackson nodded. Now comes the hard part. The hard part? Deciding what happens next. The Coalition Council met in emergency session 6 days after the battle. Representatives from every human world, military commanders, civilian leaders, and for the first time, Valorian representatives. The chamber was tense. Admiral Jackson stood before the council, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from the battle. We won. At terrible cost. But we won. Now we must decide what victory means. A human counselor stood. The Valorians brought this enemy to our doorstep. We lost 48,000 souls. 37 ships. 2 colonies evacuated. How do we not hold them responsible? Commander Zelith rose slowly. His body still hurt from his injuries. But he stood straight. You are right to blame us. The scourge was our creation. Our sin. We were conquerors. We destroyed the Kethvar and drove them to build a weapon of extinction. Every death in this war traces back to Valorian arrogance. The chamber fell silent. Zelith continued. We cannot give you back your dead. We cannot undo the harm we caused. But we can give you something else. Everything we know. Every technology. Every piece of knowledge from 10,000 years of empire. We can work beside you. To build something better than what we were. Another counselor spoke. An older woman. And what is to stop you from conquering again when you grow strong? Minus. In Enix. This time, Kessa stood. She had been given a seat as a civilian representative. Because we know now what conquest creates. We built an empire on domination. And it birthed our extinction. If we ever forget this lesson, we deserve whatever comes. Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside Kessa. I have worked with the Valorians for months. I have seen their grief, their shame, their determination to be better. They are not asking for forgiveness. They are asking for a chance to earn redemption through action. The debate lasted hours. Some wanted the Valorians expelled from human space. Others wanted them confined to the Titan sector permanently. A few wanted them punished more severely. Admiral Jackson finally spoke again. We made a choice when the scourge arrived. We chose to stand. We chose to fight beside the Valorians, not for them, but with them. 37 ships were destroyed, yes. But 17 of those were Valorian vessels, crewed by refugees who gave everything to stop the monster their empire created. They bled beside us. They died beside us. That has to mean something. A vote was called. By narrow margin, the coalition decided. The Valorians would be granted refugee status with a path to citizenship. They would share their technology freely. They would work on reconstruction. And they would never rebuild their military except as part of coalition forces. Never again as conquerors. It was not forgiveness. It was a chance. In the refugee habitats, the news spread. Many Valorians wept with relief. Others felt the weight of permanent exile from their lost empire. They would never have their worlds back. They would never be what they were. They could only become something new. Lieutenant Webb returned to the ruins of New Geneva. The city was devastated, but reconstruction had already begun. Human and Valorian workers labored side by side, clearing rubble, rebuilding infrastructure. He found a group of children playing in a cleared area. Human and Valorian children, making up games, sharing toys, teaching each other words in their respective languages. They were too young to remember the empire, too young to carry the weight of history. That is the future, a voice said beside him. Webb turned to see Commander Zelith, walking with a cane from his injuries. If we do not mess it up, Webb replied. We will mess it up, Zelith said with certainty. Humans and Valorians both. We will make mistakes. We will argue. We will struggle with trust. But perhaps we will do it together. They watched the children play for a while in comfortable silence. I never thanked you, Zelith said finally, for standing with us, for fighting when you could have run. Webb shrugged. We do not run. It is a human thing. Probably stupid. Definitely stupid. Zalith agreed. But also brave. Also honorable in a way we Valorians never understood. True honor is not about formation tactics and sacred traditions. It is about standing, when standing is hard. The reconstruction took years. Valorian engineers helped rebuild New Geneva with designs that blended human and Valorian architecture. The city that emerged was something new. A symbol of cooperation. Kessa and Dr. Chen continued working together, now studying Scourge remains to ensure no trace of the network survived. They published papers together, taught together, and eventually moved into a small apartment in New Geneva overlooking the reconstruction. "We built something good from something terrible," Chen said one evening, watching the sunset over the rebuilt city. "We are still building it," Kessa replied. "Every day, we choose to work together instead of turning away. That is the real victory." The joint military academies opened, training human and Valorian soldiers in combined tactics. They studied the Scourge War extensively, learning lessons about adaptability, about fighting smart instead of fighting with honor. Admiral Jackson retired after 5 years, his place taken by a joint command structure. He spent his remaining years writing a history of the war, ensuring that both species would remember what they had achieved together. Commander Zalith never returned to military service. Instead, he became a teacher, educating young Valorians about their empire's history, about its crimes, about the price of arrogance. His students were sometimes angry, sometimes ashamed, but they learned. 20 years after the Scourge War, the first joint colony was established. New Valoria, they called it. A world where both species would settle together from the beginning. Not human. Not Valorian. Something new. Lieutenant Webb, now General Webb, attended the founding ceremony with his wife, a Valorian engineer who had worked on the colony designs. Their daughter, one of the first human Valorian families, played with other children near the ceremonial platform. "Do you think it will last?" his wife asked, watching the diverse crowd celebrating. "I do not know," Webb admitted, "but we are trying. And that is what humans do. We try. We fail. We try again. We never stop trying." The colony thrived. Others followed. Human and Valorian traders established routes between worlds. Scientists collaborated on research stations. Artists blended their cultures into new forms of expression. It was not perfect. There were tensions. There were arguments about resources, about history, about representation in government. Some humans never trusted Valorians. Some Valorians never forgave themselves for what their empire had done. But they kept working together. Dr. Chen and Kessa, now old, sat on their porch watching New Geneva's lights. The city had grown beyond its original boundaries, a sprawling metropolis of 2 species learning to share one space. "Do you ever regret it?" Chen asked. "Giving up the empire? Becoming refugees?" Kessa thought for a long moment. "I regret what we were. I regret the suffering we caused. But becoming refugees? No. It forced us to become something better. It gave us you." Chen smiled. "Humanity got something too. Your knowledge. Your perspective. You make us think differently. We make each other better." They sat in silence, watching the city lights. Somewhere in those lights, humans and Valorians worked, lived, loved, argued, and grew together. It was messy. It was complicated. It was imperfect. It was hope. The memorial to the Scourge War stood in the center of New Geneva. A simple monument with 48,000 names of humans who died. Beside it, a second monument with the names of Valorian dead, and between them, a plaque with words chosen carefully by both species. They stood together when standing was hard. They fought together when survival seemed impossible. They chose to build together when hate would have been easier. This is the price of peace. This is the cost of redemption. This is what it means to refuse to surrender to darkness. Beneath the words, a single sentence in both languages. On the anniversary of the battle's end, Survivors gathered at the memorial. They were fewer each year, age claiming what war had not. But they came together. Human and Valorian, remembering. General Webb, now very old, placed flowers at the memorial for his Marine who died in the command unit. Commander Zalith, walking slowly, placed tribute for the ship crews who never came home. They met at the memorial's center, two old soldiers who had once been enemies, then allies, now friends. "We gave everything for one last chance," Zalith said. "And we made it count," Webb replied. They stood together in silence, remembering the battle, remembering the fallen, remembering the moment when two species chose to stand together against the darkness. Above them, ships moved through the sky. Human vessels and Valorian vessels, no longer separate fleets but one combined force. Protecting worlds, exploring new systems, building a future neither species could have achieved alone. The Empire had crossed into Terran space as refugees, carrying nothing but desperation and shame. They had given everything for one last chance. And humanity, in its stubborn, reckless, impossible way, had given them that chance. Together, they built something worth the sacrifice. Together, they proved that redemption was possible. Together, they showed the galaxy that even from the ashes of empires and the rubble of war, hope could grow. It was not the ending anyone expected, but it was the ending they earned, together.